This is the awesome next-gen crypto wallet design from Pedro Tribizon of Dribbble. And today, we're going to learn just how easy it is to create these custom shape buttons. We'll use Figma to build the assets, then move into Godot to give it some functionality. Let's go. So I took a screenshot of the image. Now let's bring it into Figma and start mocking it up. First, let's use the rulers to make it easier to line things up as we're creating. I'm also going to create a ruler for the height of the button, as well as the center and where the edge of the button would be. Now, using the pen tool, I can start drawing out this button. Now that we have our curve set up, let's go ahead and change the color of our button to a white. And we're going to remove our stroke since we don't need that anymore. Now we're going to rename this layer. And finally, we're going to save it as an SVG, as an asset for our Godot project. Speaking of Godot, let's head on over there now and start making some custom shape buttons. So here in Godot, we've created a new project, called it Custom Tab Buttons. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that white button that we created. We can use this user interface to create our first control node. We're going to go ahead and rename this full screen. Let's go ahead and save that. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this is the full screen to the anchors. We're going to create our overall background with a color rect. We're going to set the anchors to full screen. And we're going to change our background to the custom color that we had from our mockup. Let's go ahead and save that now as a swatch, because we're going to use it later. And having it as a swatch makes it real convenient. So what we want to do now is we want to create a box container. Because we're going to want to hold elements vertically inside this container. So let's go ahead and center a rough size here. In fact, let's just adjust transform. We're going to rename this our panel container. Now we're going to create a child of that panel container, the panel. We're going to call this panel. It's going to hold the body, all the information that our design would have. And this one we can go ahead and change our layout with our container sizing, expand. So that's going to take up the whole space for now. Then what we want to do, come down to theme overrides, styles. From this drop down, we're going to choose style box flat. Click onto it, and we'll adjust some of these options. Background color is going to be from what we had at the mockup. We'll save that swatch. Now for this panel, we're going to want the top corners to be rounded, like in our mockup. We're going to do that. The corner radius, we're going to change the top left to 20 pixels. And we're going to change the top right, 20 pixels. So that'll give us a nice rounded corner. But if we zoom in, we're going to see a problem here. We've got this blurry edge going on. So let's fix that. We use rounded corners. Even on a panel, Godot wants to turn on the anti-alias by default. So what we need to do is we need to come down here, turn it off. And that'll give us a nice crisp edge. We're also going to want to change on our visibility. The clip children, we're going to change that to clip and draw. Because when we have their nodes as children, we want their top corners to be clipped off as well. But we want to be able to clip a single bottom corner. So let's go ahead and make that right now. We'll make from the top panel, child, with another panel. We'll call this our orange background. We're going to go ahead and fill the whole screen. And then the overrides style panel, we're going to change its style box flat again, and its background color. We'll save that as a swatch. And we're going to want to change the corner radius of just bottom left-hand side, 20 pixels. That's going to create the look of the rounded left corner on the mockup. Let's not forget, we need to turn our anti-aliasing off. So let's add one more thing to this background. We'll add a label. Here we're going to change its font size, 25. Let's go ahead and center this one on the top, and then we'll bring it down a little bit just by dragging. Okay, and now that you know how to create the orange background element, it's time for an exercise. Now I want you to create a gray background element of your own. I want you to set the background so that it fills the area correctly. I want to have this background be using that light gray swatch that we created. You want to make sure the round corner on the bottom is on the right side of what we have now. Go ahead and pause the video now and try it. See if you can make it happen. Okay, here's what I did. In the top panel, we're going to create another panel. I'm going to call this the gray background. I'm going to set it to full screen. I'm going to change style to the style box flat. Go ahead and change our background color, light gray we used. And we're going to make sure we change our corner radius, the bottom right. And the last thing we need to do is turn our anti-aliasing off. We want to keep our edges crisp since we're using those rounded corners. Let's go ahead and add another label. This will say gray background. Let's change its font size to 25, and let's just go ahead and put it in the center. It looks real nice. So next up is to create these bottom tabs. We're going to do that here, creating another panel as a child, the panel container. And here, layout, container sizing, we're going to set this to expand. And because we only want this to be an empty container itself, let's come down to theme overrides, styles, empty, and we're actually going to use this one right here, style box empty. Because all we needed to do is be a container. Now, let's add our first button. We'll make the orange button. Go ahead and add a texture button. We're going to rename this to orange button. Now under textures, normal, we can either do a quick load or we can drag it in. For now, I'll just do a quick load. We're going to go ahead and ignore the texture size. We're going to change its stretch mode to aspect. We're going to flip its horizontal to on. Under layout, or transform, we're going to change its size to 176. And the Y is going to be something around 60, should work fine. Now what we need to do is we need to get this button to be on the top right of this panel. We can do that up here, set it right there.
the top right anchor preset. Now what we need to do with this button is we need to change its color. So if we go down to visibility, we change its self-modulate, that orange color, it will affect just the button. Now, if we had chosen modulate, it would affect the current button and any child nodes underneath it. As in our case, we're going to need to add label. We don't want to have its color affected by the orange color. So let's do that now. Like our mockup, we'll say details. I'm going to go ahead and just make it uppercase. You can either type it out, turn on uppercase, or you can type it out in all caps. It's your choice. I just like the flexibility of being able to force the uppercase. So let's go down to our theme override. If we go to colors, we can just turn on font color and it'll automatically set it to black. Then for font size, we'll go ahead and go with about 10. And if we anchor the center, we'll put our text in the center of this box. But you can see it's not in the center of the text box. So up at the top, let's change horizontal alignment center and the vertical alignment center. It doesn't center it correctly, this part of the center. So we'll just have to move this offset a little bit manually. Okay, now that I've created the orange button, it's time for another exercise. This time, I want you to create the gray button. Now you'll want to use the same white button asset we have already. You want to make the button's color use that same light gray swatch again. You want the button's position to be on the opposite side of the panel, and I want you to try to do that using the anchors. And finally, I want you to change the text to that label. And not the same light gray swatch that we've been using, just something even lighter gray, just so it stands out a little bit. Go ahead and pause the video and try it now. See if you can create it. Okay, here's what I did. From this tab panel, let's go ahead and create a new texture button. Call this the gray button. Just for variety, drop in our image this time. We're going to just set the ignore texture size. We want to keep the aspect. This time we don't want to flip the horizontal because it's actually pointing in the right direction. We do want to come down, layout, transform. Remember, we'll adjust its size again. 76. We'll go 60 again. And we're going to change the anchor point top left, and that's going to put it in the top left corner. We need to go down to visibility and change our self-modulate for our light gray color. And the last thing we need to do is to add our label. Your theme override. Here's how I'm going to change that font color. I'll start with our light gray swatch and I'll lighten it up a little bit. Something like that looks good. We can add it as another swatch. Change our font size, followed by center, center, center. Check out our positioning for this one. This was on the 14. I'll just manually eyeball this one.
One last little detail that we need to take care of is this gap between this panel on the bottom and the panel on the top. And we're going to do that up here in the VBox container that we've called panel container. Click on that. We're going to come down to theme overrides. Now under constants, if we just turn on the separation to be 0, it automatically butts those up against each other. So before we get to how to change this gray background to stretch the whole size, do me a favor, and if you've liked this video so far, please give it a like and a subscribe so you don't forget later. Thanks. Okay, in order to make this background to take up the entire area, we just have to make one adjustment here to the custom minimum. That's going to be 530. And by doing that, it expands out this panel up here to fill in the rest of the space, because these buttons are in a smaller panel that are only taking up the size of these buttons. Let's run it and give it a try. Notice that it looks great, but it's missing something. It needs functionality, because right now when we click on it, nothing happens. And that's where the scripting comes in. Let's take care of that. We're going to come up over here to the control screen. We're going to add script, create. So we're going to need to grab some references. First, we're going to grab one to the orange button, then our orange background. We'll grab the gray button and the gray background. And now if we click on our orange button, what we can do is we can attach a signal to it, and we'll use this one right here, pressed. And we're going to attach that to the script that we've created for the control screen.
We're actually going to need one more reference to each panel, the top panel, as well as the tab panels. We're going to need those because in order to switch the buttons around, when we click on the orange button over here, we want to bring its position in this panel to the first index, because currently it's at the 0 index. So we need it to get moved. So in other words, this gray is to go here. That orange would be now in the 1 position. The gray would be in the 0 index position. So let's undo that. And let's do that in code. So we're going to need to grab a reference to the tab panel. We're going to say move child. We're going to tell it to use the orange button. We're going to tell it to go to first index. We're going to do the same thing. Panel. Move child. Orange background. First index. That's all we need to do. Pretty simple. So now that you've seen how the orange button is wired up, it's time for our final exercise. Here's your chance to create the functionality for the gray button based on what you've learned from what we've done with the orange button. When the gray button is pressed, it should call a function. Use a signal for that. In that function, it needs to move the child of each the gray button and the gray background to the number 1 index position. Go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. Okay, here's what I did. Selected the gray button, we're adding the signal, gray button pressed. This time we're going to move the gray, number 1. The top panel, we're going to move the background, first index position. Okay, let's give it a try. That's it. Okay, thanks for joining me. You know what? If you could do me a favor and tell me a dad joke down in the comments below, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.